big things that we used to use that for was saying to people, listen, isolation is a bad thing. You cannot avoid things. You need to step into a community, build a support network around you, make sure you've got a lot of people around you that you can speak to and talk to when you're struggling. Otherwise, you're going to spiral into a place of depression, fear, anxiety, and all these different things that are kicking in for you. So keep coming outdoors, keep coming into these drop-in facilities and connecting with people as much as you can.
And obviously, there's a lot of parents right now that are dealing with their kids on a mental health side. The pandemic for COVID was obviously immense. It took a huge toll on our populace, on our kids, even on us, especially as adults as well. And I think, when we're talking about addiction and coping mechanisms, I think it's easy to point at somebody who's an addict because it's an easy find. To see the alcohol, the drugs, the sex, the gambling, the shopping, whatever the coping mechanism was for sober people, really got interrupted.
Yeah.
And when sober people started to see that, and I don't think they actually really catch the metaphor of, that's their coping mechanism, that we all have them. I've got a good 5 or 6 strong go-tos that I go to. But then that creates the anxiety that we saw on social media. We've seen that anxiety in our society, in our restaurants, in our places of business, in our church, in our communities, and all that. And I really wanted to get into your view on anxiety. What is anxiety? How people process anxiety? How it lands in the body? And I thought we'd just start there. So if you could just speak to that.
Yeah, for sure. So I think before we get into that, just want to touch a little bit on something that's a really dominant coping mechanism that is anxiety related, that's called experiential avoidance. This is something that, as a result of the pandemic, has become a really big issue, particularly with people who've struggled with any kind of addictive or compulsive coping mechanisms, mental health issues. Because for years and years, we've been saying to people, like when I worked at CMHA, we had a drop-in program there, and one of the big things that we used to use that for was saying to people, listen, isolation is a bad thing. You cannot avoid things. You need to step into a community, build a support network around you, make sure you've got a lot of people around you that you can speak to and talk to when you're struggling. Otherwise, you're going to spiral into a place of depression, fear, anxiety, and all these different things that are kicking in for you. So keep coming outdoors, keep coming into these drop-in facilities and connecting with people as much as you can. Then the pandemic hit and we went, no, change all that, stay home and don't come out. So what's happened for a lot of people is that they've become what's called experientially avoidant. So the thought of stepping back out into the community, the thought of connecting with people creates a massive amount of anxiety inside of their system, a massive amount of fear that starts to come to the forefront. So the coping mechanism for that is procrastination, avoidance, staying at home, not doing anything. And it's all driven by the anxiety and fear that comes from going back out into the community. So anxiety itself is something that I've got a lot of really strong opinions about, because I think it is something that I struggled with myself. It's something that I think, as somebody who used alcohol as a coping mechanism, a lot of people who struggle with alcohol use as a coping mechanism do struggle with anxiety underneath the surface. So when we start talking about anxiety itself, I think, and this is a pretty strong opinion, I know there's some people who probably wouldn't agree with it, but I do think we have a tendency of over pathologizing it in society a lot, because there's nothing wrong with anxiety per se. It's a naturally occurring emotion that feeling that every single human being is going to experience at some point in time. And it's a lot of people have this misconception about anxiety that it is the situation that's causing me to feel anxious. But it's not the situation that's causing you to feel anxious. It's actually your perception of the situation that causes you to feel anxious. So it really comes down to the way that we are processing what's happening in the external world, to see the level of fear, which is basically anxiety is just another, falls under the umbrella of fear. Okay. Yeah. So to notice the level of fear that's coming into your system based on this particular story that you've got about what's happening in the world. So the other piece I think that's really important to understand about anxiety is quite often in the world of diagnoses. So first of all, I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a psychiatrist. So I'm not qualified or able to give anybody a diagnosis, but quite often in the world of diagnoses, anxiety and depression have a tendency of going together. So the amount of people that I meet that when you start talking about their diagnosis say that, oh, anxiety and depression. It's really important when you start talking about these things to understand that usually, and again, not always, when we start talking about this stuff, it's not black and white. It's not exactly the same. Not trying to paint everybody with the same brush, because that's definitely not. But usually in those kind of situations, when somebody comes in with an anxiety and depression diagnosis, it's really important to understand which one comes first, because there's usually one that's dominant and one that's kind of underneath it, right? So, for example, if anxiety is the primary, then I feel anxious all the time. I can't go outside. I'm afraid of exposing myself to particular emotions or situations, and the fact that I'm anxious all the time causes me to be depressed. Or it could be the other way around, which is depression is the primary, which is I'm depressed, I'm sad, I can't get up in the morning, I can't get out of bed, I feel so alone, I feel like I'm completely isolated, and the fact that I'm so depressed all the time makes me feel anxious. So it's really important to understand which is the primary and which is the secondary, because it kind of changes the way that you're working with somebody. If anxiety is the primary, you're going to focus on the anxiety. If depression is the primary, you're going to focus on the depression, because if you work on the anxiety, the depression is secondary, right? So anxiety itself is it's something I think that we label a lot in society with people, particularly young people. It gets thrown around quite a lot, like, or I'm really anxious. And it seems to me like we've created this a bit of a monster in society where we have this belief that we can fix anxiety with a pill. So we're going into this kind of societal coping mechanism, if you like, that as soon as somebody says they're anxious, we're prescribing medication to them, rather than trying to teach them how to look at the stories they've got, look at the different perceptions that they've got about situations that is causing the anxiety. We seem to be just like throwing a medication into the mix to try to fix the problem as fast as we can, which is also causing problems in itself, because it creates this mentality of instant gratification. So inside of the world of addiction, we're often talking about the pig. So the pig is the problem with instant gratification. We develop this mentality of instant gratification or instant fix for the problem, which is what an addictive lifestyle is. I've got an issue with anxiety. I've got an issue with depression. I feel guilty. I feel ashamed. I feel sad. And as a result of that, I need to fix this problem really quickly, because I don't want to sit in this space for too long. So I use the substance, or I take the pill, or I do this thing that kind of fixes it really quickly. What we need to start doing, I think, in my opinion, when we're working on these things is, in some cases, some people have such extreme anxiety that there is some kind of a medication that's needed to try to help them come down, particularly with things like panic attacks, anxiety attacks. It can be really helpful to use certain medications to help people out of those situations. However, in the long run, what we need to be trying to teach people is how to use the skills of things like mindfulness. I love dialectical behavior therapy, to help people to start to understand that anxiety, a lot of the anxiety that people experience that we are pathologizing, is actually more about our perception of what's happening than what's actually happening itself. Hey guys, first of all, I want to thank you for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed the content. This particular chat was filmed as a part of the podcast series to support my good friend Chuck Basti and all the work he does as a mental health advocate at Chuck's World of Infinite Mojo. If you want to see the full podcast or just see more of what Chuck does on his social media platform, check out his YouTube channel that's linked in the description below. When it comes to what's going on here, I am on a serious mission to make this platform profitable. Why? Because when I do, I am committed to making sure that every single penny of profit that's made from this YouTube channel goes back into serving the community that needs it most. So, as always, please like this video, leave a comment below, and make sure you subscribe to the channel to get all the latest content available right here at The Liberation Place. Come join us for our live online conversations every week. I'll put all the links in the description below, and let's get the word out there about living the life you want to live, not staying stuck in the life you're currently stuck in. Hopefully, see you soon.